All right, Jimmy D and the Wolf.
Hello, everybody.
Number 21.
21.
A little bit late.
Yeah. I think it's the first time we've actually been late, isn't it?
No, we've been late before.
Have we?
We've been late before. Not often.
Well, things just keep getting crazier, man. It's incredible that we pull them off this close to
2020.
regularly as
2020
we have.
is to go down. I mean, we were amazed after.
Oh, man.
Before this whole unrest happened.
Unbelievable.
Now, I mean, what more? I mean, now all bets are off. What the rest of the year going to look like?
It's crazy, man.
I hope we don't have World War III.
Talking about bringing in the military on civilians and things. You know, I'm praying for a lot more people in Louisville because things are crazy right there, or right now there. And it's bad everywhere, man. I mean, what can... But the question is, what were those people supposed to do? You know, you can't have a slogan without everybody pushing back. When Kaepernick kneeled, they buried his career. That was the end of him. I mean,
you know, yeah. Imagine
what protest are people going to accept and say, yeah, you know, there's a huge problem here, and it needs addressed. It needs fixed.
Yeah, I think it's so unfortunate that he, you know, basically followed the Martin Luther King, and he was considered by a segment of our society that was disrespecting our flag.
Yeah.
And I think, if I understand their complaints with him, and he is vilified and denigrated by conservatives. Can't stand him, you know.
Yeah.
And this is the police brutality is what he was talking about. Okay, if we're going to get into it, we hadn't discussed what we were going to talk about.
Man,
but here is my take that I haven't heard anywhere else explained. George Floyd went into a store that he was a regular. I saw an interview on, there was one on CNN and there was one on NBC. The store has been owned by a family, and they were interviewed on CNN, and they look like they're Middle Eastern. They all have the beards, and their names are Middle Eastern type names. Mm-hmm. And so Arabic, I guess, or there's a lot of different ethnicities. I'm not sure which ethnicity, but they've had, and the owner said that George Floyd had been in there many times. He was a regular. They knew him well. And but the owner wasn't there that day. He was off, or I think his son was running it, or the staff. And he went in and passed a $20 bill. And after he left, they determined that it was fraudulent. They said, and so they called the cops. And he was still there when the cops arrived, when the police arrived. And the owner said that he said there's a chance, he didn't say what percent, but he says he's not sure that George Floyd even knew it was a fake bill.
Well, you know,
so
I can't guarantee I've never passed a fake bill.
Me neither.
I've never knowingly passed one.
I've never knowingly either, but I don't check.
How would you know? Yeah, you don't look at it, man. I mean, we're Americans. You don't look at that.
So I mean,
sandwich, you just throw the 20 out there or whatever.
If you are going to pass a bad bill, I mean, just put yourself in the mind of a criminal who's going to pass a bad bill. Are you going to do it where you're known and where you are a regular?
Probably not.
Probably not. And after you do it, are you going to hang out in front of the store? And the amount of time it took for the police to respond? I mean, again, not from experience, but if I'm passing a bad bill, I'm gone.
You're out. Yeah, you're going to bolt. And you're probably not going to pass it at your regular spot.
So I equate it to, imagine all these people that are saying, because I've seen comments online of, you know, he had it coming. I even saw a comment where somebody said, well, in Texas, he was arrested for breaking and entering, And since he survived that, because a lot of people in Texas have guns, it was karma. It was coming to him because, karma comes around. He shouldn't have been breaking it out. So justifying the fact that he deserved what he got, I've seen a lot of comments like that. And it makes me so angry. I can't even, there was a few days that I couldn't even do my normal routine. But anyway, equate it to, a middle-aged white 20-year-old at the Mall of America, somebody's niece shoplifting a $20 item. Are they going to send all those? There looked to me like there were like up as many as 6 squad cars there.
Yeah.
There was a huge response.
Yeah.
And there were more than 4 officers there. There were 4 that were involved, but there were more than that there. Why such a incredibly heavy-handed response to a $20 deal?
Because he's a big dude. He was a big dude, and whoever was on the scene first was probably scared. I guess.
He was 6'6".
I guess that's why.
And a friend of mine that who's a big, large black man, and I sent that to you. He posted how he said this brings out how I live my life all day, every day. I mean, I smile. I'm an introvert, and I make sure I smile because if I smile, people don't think I'm in danger. Yeah. And if you're a large black man, people I don't think of that. I mean. And then there was a post on Facebook, a guy in Minneapolis, he was a building inspector, and he called this police officer and said, with all this unrest, I have to do my job, and I'll be walking around buildings, and I'm a large guy, and I've got dreadlocks, and I don't want people to think that I'm criminal.
Right.
And we have a problem.
It's huge.
We have a problem. I mean, to say that there's no difference, if the guy was white, if he had been white, or if he'd even been a smaller guy, if he hadn't been a large black man,
I'd still be alive.
Yeah, I'd still be alive too.
If that was me and the $20 bill, I'd still be alive. I can say that with great confidence.
Me too.
And I'm not, at the same time, man, I support law enforcement, and I'm not saying that most of them are a certain way because I don't believe that. I think most people in general are great people. But there's a problem in America with how afraid so many people are. And it's everywhere, man. It's not just, people say, well, so many people are racist because they were raised that way. It's not just that. There's negative imagery everywhere. African American males especially. And that's why this whole thing is so polarizing to the nation, because it just struck a nerve. It's like the perfect storm, If you're a decent person, if you saw the video, you were mortified by it, and it stuck with you. I can't get it out of my head, days later. And there's just not enough. I don't know the right answer, but I think it's this. I mean, the protests need to happen. Awareness, there needs to be more awareness. I have no idea what it feels like to be anything other than a Midwestern white guy, But all that being said, I couldn't imagine dealing with that on a regular basis. And I have so many friends that say, I haven't been privileged. I haven't been advantaged in life. You know that. I've had rough upbringing and stuff. But when I try to break it down to some of my friends that say there's no such thing as white privilege, that is the definition of it to me. I have 3 children, and I don't really worry about one of my 3 children accidentally being murdered by a police officer in the future because split second, a police officer made the wrong decision based on a stereotype, To me, that is the very definition of white privilege. I don't have to worry about my kids probably dying in a scenario because somebody thought they behaved a certain way, And I mean, just that and these things happen too often. I mean, every couple years or couple months anymore, it seems like there's a racial murder either by a police officer or by a citizen. And this one is just so much worse because it was so drawn out.
Yeah, I mean, I saw
it wasn't a bang split-second decision. The guy tortured him, man. It was a slow, grueling, and not just like to see the other people there, and it just captured that feeling of powerlessness because the other people there wanted to push the cop off of him, but they knew that they were going to get maced or shot or tased or whatever.
Well, he reached into at one time. He reached into his pocket and pulled out mace.
Yeah, so that's a whole nother thing. And the look on the guy's face.
He was angry. He was very well. Apparently, now there was a new video that came up, and apparently there was somewhat a bit of a struggle to get him in the backseat of the car. That was reported. There was a video I saw today that apparently they tried to get him in the car, and he was resisting. Well, he probably didn't think he should have been handcuffed for a $20 thing, or he didn't think he did anything wrong.
Yeah.
I mean, I wonder what is the practice? Is it a $20 thing? I mean, do you need to get handcuffed and drawn away for what is the limit?
Well, this is the whole other opposite side of the spectrum is if there was a struggle and we all know how things went down, if there was a struggle, what happens if this guy walks? What happens if the cop walks or does a year? What then? Everything is in a state of turmoil right now. Everything. Buildings being burned, people being attacked, people have died, people have been shot, there's been murders. All hell's breaking loose in Louisville right now as we speak. I mean, in Nashville, it's been a little crazy too. What happens if he walks?
Well, that'll be more unrest.
It's a crazy time, man.
It is a crazy time.
But what do you do? I mean, it's frustrating to look at because you can't change people's hearts. And that's what needs to happen. People need to have their hearts changed.
And it's, there was I've had some exchanges because I get into the thick of it sometimes, and sometimes I feel like I'm wasting my time. But I got into an exchange where I was talking about the issue with, for example, in the 50s and the 60s, well, since World War II, we institutionalized and made it very difficult for African Americans to buy homes. Now, for most Americans, a home is our biggest asset. Mm-hmm. Most Americans, unless you're a 1%er, then your many homes are your biggest assets.
Right. Your many vacation homes.
And in the 50s and the 60s, up until 68, when it became illegal to discriminate, and even after that, I don't know what happened, but it was systematic denial and forcing African Americans to not to level up because of the practices, and because of that continues on. Home ownership is almost just a little bit more than half of black home ownership is low 40%. White average home ownership in this country is 72%. And average of all ethnicities is 63%, according to an article I read. I think those are 2018 numbers, maybe 2017 numbers. So more telling is average net worth of white families is $170,000. And the average of net worth of African American families is $17,000. So it's 1/10. Yeah. So it's continued the repression of not being able to buy homes has continued because what happens? Most first-time home buyers either have a program or they get a loan, a secret loan from a dad or a grandparent that doesn't show up on the books because they don't have the down payment, and they give that leg up. But if nobody in the family has the assets to do that, nobody buys a house, and it keeps going generation after generation.
Yes.
And you end up with it's really hard to eradicate that, and this is a major problem. And I got it. And then also there's other, everyone knows, I don't even quote the numbers because everyone knows that most of the people that are incarcerated, and we incarcerate a higher percentage of our population by far than any other developed country. We just institutionalize.
Yeah, well, it's the 13th Amendment, man. I mean, it's just a different kind of slavery. Slavery just got a facelift. It didn't really go away.
And a very high percentage of the people that get incarcerated are African American.
Absolutely. And now so many of the prisons are privatized, so now it's human beings as commodity for big business.
Yeah, because the more that get put away, the more money that's a money-making thing for them. So we incarcerate way more African Americans. And once you get caught in the jaws of the law, and you can't make bond, you don't have. I mean, it's just it's an endless thing that makes it difficult. That it's hard to break out of. And this individual that I don't know, it was just someone on a website, and I posted all these things, and he said, "You're full of it." And he said, let me finish. He said, "You're full of it," and he said, "It's all about initiative. You're only talking about those that want a free handout. Anybody can pull themselves up if they just want to." And that is a typical response to anyone who says white privilege. You know, when I talk about white privilege, they say, well, they're not trying hard enough.
Sure. Well, they have to be able to tell themselves that, because if the average white American acknowledges the statistics, then they have to acknowledge that systemic racism is a huge thing, hardwired into the fabric of our country, essentially. And then everybody has a level playing field. But I like to believe that it's more ignorance than anything, that the bulk of white America truly does believe that illusion of, hey, it's a level playing field for everybody. There are so many white Americans that if they realized how skewed the system truly is against African Americans, they would be like, this is jacked up. A lot of things need to change. This isn't right. I believe that, and in my heart of hearts, I believe that. I mean, there's always going to be racism. Until everybody's the same color, you're going to have ignorant people that are racist, no matter what. But I think that the bulk of Americans that feel that way just are uninformed.
Now, conversely, one of our previous podcasts, maybe 5 or 6 podcasts ago, we did a couple of them, Deaths of Despair.
Yeah.
Of blue-collar white. That was a study that was specifically about blue-collar white workers or people, and how deaths of despair from suicide, alcoholism, things like that, drug overdose. And yes, there's a major issue, and those people are white, and we have a big issue with low income disparity of any kind of a race.
Sure.
But it's stacked on top for African Americans.
Yeah, and it's insane because it's all relative. Those disparities exist on different levels. So many of the white blue collar workers are miserable because they say, I don't have $500,000 in my 401k, as opposed to, people that are like the stock market crashes and people jump off buildings because, well, I don't have $10 million in the bank anymore, or I don't have $15 million. It's all you have misery at every level because we're such a consumer-based society that it's all based on material aspects of wealth. It's all relative. I mean, it's like if you're poverty-stricken in the ghetto, and it doesn't mean that you're any less happy than a blue-collar worker that's making $100,000 a year. It's all relative to me. Wealth is all just, it's what's the mindset of how much do they really feel like they have to have.
Well, there was a study that showed, and this was a few years ago, maybe the number has been increased, but basically $75,000 annual salary. I mean, okay, if you're making $12,000 a year, most likely you've got money worries. You're worried about anything could go wrong. You're living on the edge.
Sure.
You know, maybe you have a house, or maybe if you lose your job, or if you get picked up and you have to pay bond, you can't pay the bond. Or
right.
Even simple, there was a municipality that was making practice of this, of putting $250 bonds and the poor people couldn't pay it, and they ended up being incarcerated because it was ticky-tack things, and the action was, I can't remember reading an article about that. But, you know, you're right on the edge, and any one thing goes bad.
Sure.
Or maybe, you know, you're a single mother, and you got everything worked out where you can have your kid taken care of by your mom certain days, and everything is just a very timely, very
can't miss a week.
Can't miss a week, and everything is gotta be, and something goes wrong, you get sick, or your car breaks down, or something else, and all of a sudden that blows up, and you fall behind, you can't ever catch up.
Sure.
And so that's, money is a concern. And then when you get up into 30, 40,000, you know, you probably don't have that, you're not that much on the edge, but you still, you know, you probably can't take vacations, and you probably, it's hard to eat out as much as you want. But once you get to like 75,000, of course, it depends where you're living. We might have touched on this in a previous podcast. Additional money after that really doesn't bring, because
you're comfortable. You're provided for.
You're provided for, and you can you know, have some celebration dinner nights, or it depends where you live. I mean, if you live in South Dakota and you're making 75,000,
yeah,
I mean, you're living like a king.
Yeah, you live in southern Indiana, you're living like a king at 75,000, and you can do it in southern Indiana. I mean, you can do it without a formal education. In my neck of the
you were
woods.
telling me somebody making six figures as welder?
Yeah, I know quite a few guys that are making six figures as welders in southern Indiana. Welders, factory workers. It's doable. And I know a lot of them that are also working 100 hours a week and hating life. So it's all relative. I mean, you're always better off to get an education, of course, but there's opportunity there.
Well, and I know it's, I've had a discussion with folks, usually they're conservative, that say that the opportunity is there for anyone, but they don't realize, and the example I like to give, we had Pine Ridge Reservation in South Dakota, where I'm from, is the poorest section of the country, and it'll break your heart to go there. There's alcoholism, there's child molestation, there's just the horrors of horror upon horror. And we had these missionaries that came to our church and talked about, they had a compound with a fence around it, a few acres maybe, and they had a gymnasium, they had some different things there. And they said that they would find kids sleeping in the weeds on the property, just inside the fence during the summer, just so they could get out of the house to get away from the beatings and the molestations. Oh, wow. And I mean, breaks your heart. And so you're in that community, and no one gets up and goes to work, because they do get a check from the government. It's not much, and when that check comes, they don't sell alcohol on the reservation, but there are liquor stores set up just on the border, and they get ready for when the checks come. The day that the checks come, they're busy, because they come and get their alcohol, because they're trying to Don't drink away their sorrows. I am so well spoken.
Sorry.
Anyway, and I believe if you're a quarter Native American, you can get college for free. There is a percentage, or there used to be. And I went to school, the School of Mines in South Dakota. I think we talked about that before. It was at one time the only school that the average salary was more than it cost to go for 4 years.
Yeah.
I'm quite proud of that.
Better than Harvard.
Better than Harvard. And I remember there was a kid it was 2,000 students, so you pretty much knew everyone. And there was a Native American kid who was attending. And that was such a novelty. Now, that's West River where more of the Native Americans are. And it was such a novelty. And so you'd think, well, they got a free college ride. Why don't they all go? Well, if you've never known anyone who is ever going to college, how are you ever going to have that go into your brain that you can do that?
You almost need to see it done, you know?
You need to see. I mean, there are exceptions.
Sure.
But don't normalize the exception.
Don't normalize the exception.
Thank you, my brother-in-law Lincoln. Anyway, so for these kids, you say, well, they have the opportunity. They could get a job. Well, they've never seen anyone who gets up and goes to work every day. How in the world are they ever going to figure out that in order to get a job, you have to get to work and be responsible?
Sure. And there's a million little things along the way.
They don't have any role model.
Sure.
They don't know anyone who gets up. So you're gonna find the kid who's gonna say, well, that's not gonna be me. All you know is what you see, and everybody tries to emulate their dad, or the people, the men, or the guys, the boys try to emulate their and if their dad isn't present, other men that are around that they see, and if all they see them are getting drunk and sexually abusing people. That's what they're going to do. Sure. I mean, now you can find the rare one, like the guy who was at my school, but 2,000 students for 4 years, he was the only one, and he was only there 1 year, and then I don't know what happened. So it's really hard to. I mean, so you can't imagine. Now, yes, there are exceptional folks who do break out, but on the average, it's very rare and hard to do that, and so you can't expect that hey, the opportunity is there. And the same thing with the African American community.
Absolutely, we're not everybody is starting at the start line in the race.
Absolutely, yes.
Everybody's starting at different places, and as a whole, it's not just one thing. When it comes to being an African American, and especially an African American male, I mean, not making light of,
and especially a large
of
African
Americans, but
you 6'6", you played football. People are afraid. I mean, they were afraid of George Floyd,
of course,
because he was a big man.
Yeah,
that was.
And what is their imagery? What is their imagery that they're fed on a consistent basis? Of a large black man. What's the imagery of that? Is it positive?
No.
I mean, are there TV shows that you see or movies where,
of course,
where the large black guy's the hero or the large black guy saves the day? You know, I mean, there's a million things in between that distance between where the average white guy starts at the race and where the average black guy starts at the race.
You know, and even, let's talk Asian. Let's talk race of Asian. So, you know, I have a soft spot for Asian culture because I lived in Japan and I traveled to Asia a lot. And, they have, they're hardworking, and they come here, they're all about education, and, you know, parents demand that their kids excel. And they have a culture that supports that. And but I've heard it said, you know, like even in certain fields, you don't see, you know, Asian comedians or Asian actors that have roles that are not specifically stereotypical.
Sure.
You know, that Asian guy. You know, like and I've read articles about how gratified people are with shows like Crazy Rich Asians, where there were, you know, and some of the other ones, like what was one, Fresh Off the Boat. I mean, these things didn't exist 10 years ago.
You'll have to, I apologize, I'll have to remember his name, and you'll have to go back and post it on the video. But I watched a Netflix special of a Chinese comedian, and he was not only one of the funniest comedians I've ever seen in my life, he was brilliant, and I can't remember his name. Maybe
you think
even
Ken Jun?
No, I don't think so.
Ken is a doctor. He's actually a physician, not him.
This guy, I've never seen that. I know who he is.
Okay.
I've never seen this guy, but he had a Netflix special, and it didn't do super well. I was surprised because I just stumbled into it, and he was hilarious, dude, and super duper smart. But he was a Chinese comedian, and
yeah, I think Ken Jun is Korean. I don't know if he's Korean or Chinese. I'm not sure. Anyway, interrupted your flow.
No, it's fine. But yeah, to your point, that's opportunity for them, it's not even close to as much as it is for many other groups. And you know, side note, it seems like Asians, people have somehow in America, it's like the elephant in the room when it comes to racism with every group except for Asians. It's like people make fun of Asians and nobody cares.
And well, the stereotypes, and again, I read these things because I'm more sensitive because I have friends who are Asian and I've spent a lot of time in their culture. And a stereotype of Asians: bad drivers.
Right.
They're all smart. They're all highly educated.
That might actually be true. Asian people are pretty smart.
Well, they resent that because they're expected to be the smartest person in the room. Oh, you're Asian, you can do math, blah, blah, blah. You know, and that's not necessarily the case. I mean, they're wide spectrum. They're broad spectrum, just like any other nationality.
Sure.
In Asian, there are many cultures that are discrete cultures. And you have China. Well, just take China. Even within China, you have many, because China is a big country, 1.3 billion people, and there's a lot of ethnicities even within that country. You know, in the South they speak even different languages. In the South they speak Cantonese. Mandarin is the national language. Those are two radically different languages.
Yeah. And
Hong Kong they speak Cantonese, and then the area Shenzhen and Guangzhou, which is just outside of Hong Kong, and so. These are areas that are different, and their ethnicities are different, and that's just China. And you go to all the other countries, Korea.
Do they have to press one for Cantonese? And if so, is everybody mad about it?
Good question. You know, and Japan, of course, is different, and Korea, and what else? We've got. Malaysia and Thailand and Indonesia, and all of these countries are different cultures,
right?
Different languages
to everybody except for Americans. Yeah.
I would get so irritated when I would say, "Well, what's it like? Are you going back to China? Are you going back to China again this fall?" It's not China. I'm going to Japan.
Yeah.
Oh, so can you speak some Chinese for me? I speak Japanese, not Chinese. It would just frustrate me because it's all jumbled together by many Americans. Although many Americans, I think, are becoming more knowledgeable of that. I think I've heard you talk about parsing the difference.
Yeah, I try to view it that way. Because of coming up in an environment where it was not ever viewed that way. I mean, it wasn't very ethnically diverse growing up where I grew up, but I always wanted to know. Like, we had a couple of, Japanese kids in our school, and there's probably maybe 6 or 7 African Americans in my grade. And other than that, I mean, it was all white people. And even white people go, we're just white. Well, yeah, but everybody's different. You know?
I filled out
I've always embraced that.
I finally filled out my census today. Is that too? I think I'm behind. I was supposed to already have done it. But anyway, I finally dug it out and I got on the website and I filled it out. And I was surprised that they wanted to know. I want to get it done. I just wanted to get it, cross it off so I'm not a criminal for not doing it. And I was surprised that they asked my ethnicity and I put white and they wanted to know. I had to enter in, what subset. German.
Really?
Yeah. Did you do your
I think
census?
my wife filled out ours.
Yeah, like you would have to enter Irish. You would enter Irish. I entered German because my family came from Germany and spoke German. My great grandfather when he came, and my grandfather spoke German.
I didn't know they did it that way this year.
Well,
interesting.
When I filled mine out today, I had to enter that in. And there was no option not to. I tried to leave that blank, and there was a big red. Can't go to the next page until you fill that in.
Dang.
There was no. I'm not interested in saying that. I did notice though. For sex, there were only 2 choices.
Just 2?
Just 2.
You didn't have the option to identify as an attack helicopter? Imagine that. On that note,
I want to talk about ethnic representation in media. I've told you about a show that I watch. It came out last night, the new episode. I watched it. In fact, it must come out late in the evening because I thought Insecure, Issa Rae, and it's about LA Black African American culture. Upper middle class or middle class African American culture, and she's killing it. There was an article in Billboard. She started a record company, publishing company, and she started out. She's in her mid-30s, I think, and she wrote and produced and stars in this Netflix show, which I absolutely love. They have great music.
Yeah.
Raphael Sadiq is the music supervisor, who was in Tony Tone Tone. And the music is just, I'm listening to the music. I'm like, man, I want to steal that beat. And I'm recording. I've played for you some of the beats that I got. Sure. These are all LA artists, and it's interesting that in all the scenes, almost all the principal actors are African American. And they're all for the most part, college educated and have, affluent jobs, lawyers, different things. And the only time you'll see a white person on the show is if like a server in a restaurant or a car park attendant or something like that. So it's very subtle, but I noticed that. And so you actually, when you see that's pretty usually, the African American is the coke-addled, character.
That's why when I was a kid, man, that's why the Cosby Show was such a huge deal. Because I remember how profound it seemed. That was the first time that I saw like a show that was an all-black family and everybody was just doing great. It's a doctor and a lawyer and everybody's happy and the family's together. Right. Most portrayals that I had seen personally before that were all had a negative connotation behind them. And I think Cosby Show was super powerful.
So it's a modern-day version of a Cosby Show, except not as PG.
Not as PG?
It's definitely not PG. Definitely not PG.
Not for the youths.
But the music, it's interesting. Great music. And the fact that she's got her own record company now. And in her office building, she wanted to have coffee. There was no So she started a coffee business in the basement or the ground floor of the business.
Way to be solutions oriented.
Yeah, she's killing it. Issa Rae.
Awesome.
Oh, and she was just on Netflix. It was the top Netflix show with the Pakistani guy. I can't think of his name.
Yeah.
He was in. I've seen him in a lot. He's a comedian. It was a comedy. It was a rom-com comedy. She was the female. He was the. Well, they were a couple in there. Did you see that, or did you see the?
I didn't. I just saw the preview for it.
It was good. I mean, it was what you expect. It's it's fluff. It's funny. It's outrageous, and it's just something to relax and
That's different than a lot of the Netflix storylines that I see, where Mark Wahlberg is a cop in Boston, Massachusetts.
Yeah, that's pretty rare, isn't it? Pretty rare.
That never happens.
What was the name of that show? No, what was the name of the one with the one that I'm trying to think of with the Pakistani guy?
I don't remember, to be honest with you.
And it's interesting. He is a true story that he turned into a movie that I saw on Netflix. The movie came out like 3 years ago. It was a true story of his relationship. He met this woman in L.A. and she's Caucasian, and they started dating, and then they decided to break up because he didn't know how he would introduce her to his family because they wanted him to marry a Pakistani girl.
Wow.
And then she got deathly ill with some unknown disease, and he was at her bedside, and when she woke up, she was in a coma or something, and they got married, and now they're happily married, and he turned that into a storyline, and he played himself in the movie, and his wife was played by someone else, and I guess she's not an actress, I'm not sure, but man, I'll put his name in the comments of the video. I can't remember his name, but I've seen him. He was in Silicon Valley, which was a show that I really enjoyed. Netflix. I lose track of which ones are on Netflix and HBO.
I couldn't remember the hilarious Chinese comedian dude, so don't feel bad. And he really is freaking hilarious, dude. It was the funniest thing I've seen in forever. He was brilliant.
All right, how many minutes have we been going?
We're about 42 in.
Well, let's call it. What do you think?
Let's call it, man.
All right. Jimmy D and the Wolf.
Thanks for watching, listening, being. Peace.